Kara no Shoujo is my favorite murder mystery visual novel series of all time. Kara no Shoujo combines this haunting, atmospheric aesthetic with its Japanese noir investigation narrative, all while exploring the human madness that comes from obsessions and paranoia. Every installment shows you these gruesome murders, along with the tragic, emotional grief that comes from those related to the victims. But at the very end, it shows these characters learning how to move forward in life. And in its final installment, appropriately named Paradiso, you are rewarded with one satisfying, beautiful, true ending that perfectly wraps up the series as a whole. It's a damn good detective story with great, likable characters, and I would highly recommend you go read it. And that's where this video ends, if you're not familiar with Kara no Shoujo. If you stumbled upon this video as a newcomer to the series, I would highly recommend either checking out my previous review videos of Kara no Shoujo or fully diving in and reading it yourself. But if you've already read Kara no Shoujo 2 and are wondering about my impressions of Kara no Shoujo 3, here's what I'll do. Without spoilers, I'll give you my guide/recommendations on playing Kara no Shoujo 3, so you have an idea of what to expect. And then, once you've completed Kara no Shoujo 3, return back to this video for my full open spoiler thoughts. I think it's better that way since this video is less of a review/analytical piece, but me voicing all my opinions and thoughts about this title, because there's quite a lot. With that said, this is your final warning before I talk about my recommendation guide on playing Kara no Shoujo 3. To start off, in order to grab every CG in Kara no Shoujo 3, it requires 3 full playthroughs, beginning to end. The first playthrough is your normal run of the story, with the second playthrough providing more behind-the-scenes details around certain individuals and events. It is also where you unlock a majority of the story endings, with the grand and true endings being unlocked. The third playthrough gives more additional CGs and scenes to help flesh out some more characters a bit, which makes it that much more important to use a guide to make sure you're making the correct decision choices. I'll provide a link to the guide in the description down below. Lastly, this shouldn't be a surprise to anyone by now, but don't forget to patch the game with the external patch if you buy it on Steam, because if not, you'll be missing out on a couple of pretty ghastly naked corpses. Aesthetically cool, yes, but they are still Kara no Shoujo corpses. And now, this is your warning for all the Kara no Shoujo 2 players for Kara no Shoujo 3 content. As for everyone else, or who's returned back to this video, feel free to listen to this in the background. It's gonna be a long one. Because I'm gonna start off with a pretty negative take. Kara no Shoujo 3 doesn't fulfill the expectations I had of it, especially as the finale of a trilogy. In fact, I think it might actually be the weakest one in the trilogy writing-wise. It's been several years since I read the original Kara no Shoujo 1, so I might have to revisit it, but Kara no Shoujo 3, to me, is the weakest of the installments. Now, that isn't to say I didn't enjoy Kara no Shoujo 3 in general. I still had a decent time with it, watching its characters, figuring out the mysteries, and appreciating its thematic ideas. In fact, the true ending sequence in Kara no Shoujo 3 is absolute perfection. Watching Iroha behave in the same spirited fashion as Toko, chasing after Reiji, and directly paralleling her mother down from her looks, place in the park, and even choice of words is such a beautiful, memorable scene that lives rent-free in my head. It is the perfect conclusion to the series. So then, you might be wondering, what the hell happened to make me see this installment in such a negative light? Two things: story, plot structure, neglected characters. Two of the biggest elements that make up a story, and that says a lot. Kara no Shoujo 3 has 3 big conflicts happening: the exile of Paradise Angel murders, Rokushiki escaping his prison arc, and the kidnapped children arc. Lots of stuff happens in Kara no Shoujo 3, but it doesn't feel as grandiose as it should be. Kara no Shoujo 1 had 2 separate arcs, but they were closely tied to one another. Relevant details from the first mystery continued to shed further light on the second and most important mystery. In Kara no Shoujo 2, there was only one central story to focus on. Yes, there was the Hinagata flashback arc, but that served as backstory to the main overall case. It was a really intricate and complicated web of mysteries, full of complex relationships and situations. It also gave plenty of time to focus on the characters heavily involved in that arc. I'm paraphrasing a lot, but it's why Kara no Shoujo 2 is my all-time favorite murder mystery. But in Kara no Shoujo 3, it's split into 3 separate cases. Sure, they might have have some relation between each other, the first and third arcs being the angel murder, but the cases really have nothing to do with each other. The only reason why that connection was even made was because Naruko just so happened to be a reporter for the Exile of Paradise. A pretty lame detail because he's never seen as such until the reveal. Rokushiki running away is also very important to consider because you literally cannot let that man out of your sight. As the story has proven, he is just that dangerous. As a result of all these cases going on, the reader's attention is split. They have to focus on and consider 3 separate mysteries and different casts of characters, which leads to weaker mystery writing for each individual case, an unsatisfying feel to the general overarching narrative, and lacking character development. Speaking of, let's talk about them, because I have a lot to say in how almost everyone could have been way better. Not saying that she's the worst one because I'm starting off with her, but I'm gonna start with Yukari first. I love her. I think she's a great character. She's a steady rock of reassurance for Reiji, and at this point Masaki as well. It's also a testament to her strength after all these years of her closest friends dying. I just want the girl to be happy, and I was so glad when Yukiko finally returned in the grand ending. It's such a heartfelt reunion. On another note, I actually fully support the relationship between Yukari and Masaki. They constantly tease Yukari's subconscious feelings for him, and I would have loved to see the both of them get more scenes together. I can also see him being dependable when it really matters. That shot of Masaki at the very end of the game emits so much damn aura. Unfortunately, while the first ending with the two of them is nice, I think it's kind of half-baked with no definitive state of their relationship, while constantly teasing us. The bed scene comes to mind. I would also say that about Yukari's ordeal in here too. The story had this really interesting plot point regarding her future, but I don't think they never really capitalized on that. It's how Yukari's future is closely tied to Reiji's, as I think she feels responsible for looking after him, ensuring he takes proper care of himself while he's trying to find his daughter. However, this sense of consideration clashes with her own personal priorities. It's a bit of characterization that I would have loved to see go more in depth. Last point, Yukari got an absolute great glow up in her adult years. Her in yellow and glasses damn well fits her. Next up, I wish Chie had more to do. I actually thought that she might have been like a foil to Yukari when they teased the two of them in the opening. I was convinced for the longest time that she was the culprit for the angel murders, but nah, I was hoping for way too much. At least this schoolgirl had the guts to outright commit murder and didn't look back. Actual power move when it comes to love. Chie is narratively useful for like one half of the plot for only one of the 3 major incidents. I understand why she's in here. Really, she's just another representation of a victim to her obsessions, but I mean, that's a lot of characters in this series already. The romantic involvement between Sei and Chie is neat to explore their relationship, but it's too short for it to really make a difference. The two reconvening in the end in each other's arms was a nice scene, but not that emotionally powerful in my eyes. I do think it was incredibly mean of Suzuka Miya to end her POV scene with her in jail, being informed that Sei had given birth to her daughter, which I must assume really puts a downer on things for her. It was also at this point where I'm reminded, yeah, Suzuka Miya really likes Yuri, to which I'm flashing back to my experience with the Flower series. Would also highly recommend that series too if you like Yuri. Somewhat related to Chie, I really do wish there was more dimension into Sasakura as a character. They just straight up pin him as a service level villain who sold forgeries. There were lingering elements in how the dude is involved in art but can't draw worth anything, and when you combine that with whatever relationship was going on between him and Sei, makes for some really interesting ideas, but it never went anywhere. Funny point in retrospect, while I was reading Karno Shoujo 3, I kept thinking that whoever the murderer was, it was either a man with strange inclinations or someone really into art, or both. Speaking of men, the biggest what the fuck moment was definitely Fumiya in this installment. Like, I know it's been a long while since I read Karno Shoujo 1, but I certainly don't remember him passionately loving Toko in that way. Like, when did that happen? For sure, I thought he was exclusively pining after Chizuru. Either way, I thought his whole ordeal was sloppy and just made the case way more complicated than it needed to be. Fumiya and Chizuru's bad endings included. My god, those are brutal. In terms of characters who got shafted for development, I'm really disappointed that Kaide never got any focus. Woman had so much aura and all the potential in the world, but she never contributed to anything besides testimony. me. A real downer. I thought she was gonna be Rokushiki 2.0, but on our side, but nah. Again, I was hoping for way too much. Really fun character to watch though. The closest thing to Fuyumi, who rarely got appearances, which is also a downer in its own right. I am glad Kyoko finally got a full resolution though. Throughout the series, we've seen that on and off relationship with Reiji, to which I thought the two of them would eventually end up together, but I also do like how they resolve this too. In a way, Kyoko is also a victim of the obsession. Well, more endless pining if anything, through Reiji and her late husband. Really shows off the influence Reiji's own obsession can have on people close to him. I don't mind Uozumi being the one to take Kyoko. Something about a giant bear of a man flustering in front of his crush is a contrast that is very much charming. That grand ending was very nice to watch, as both a farewell and wrap up for all the characters involved in the series. And lastly, for being a quote-unquote main poster heroine of the game, Stella is just kinda there. She does have her own quirky charm as a side character, and as a main poster girl, she sure looks the part. She's there to substitute as Reiji's emotional support post-time skip, as if them having sex wasn't clear enough, but it felt so subpar. In this fashion, Stella became a replacement for Toko, who was already a replacement for Reiji's dead fiancé. But then again, Toko is in a class all on her own. Okay, speedrun time. Masaki is pretty much relegated to the sidelines and is used as comedy a majority of the time. If anything, his main concern was resolving and getting the answers to what Naori's been doing this whole time. His subplot, I feel, was a missed opportunity, considering the implications at the cliffhanger ending in the last installment. It turned out to be a fake out, making us falsely believe that he might have been up to something far more sinister, but I'm not completely sure if that was intentional or not. Amusing undercut due to how simple his true motivations were, but underwhelming emotionally when I was reading it. Now, going back to Masaki, it's a slight disappointment to see him not do more, especially since they dropped that whole line about him being emotionally detached towards the murder of people close to him, but his focus and role in the story ended with Karo no Shoujo 2, so it was kind of whatever. Sei was a pretty cool character to watch. Emotionally struggling and pain-conflicted artists are a type of character I enjoy seeing. Her dropping all pretense in favor of Chie and her daughter was very nice to watch. Related note, I disliked how the investigation team never figured out that the original corpse wasn't Sei just because Masaki wasn't with them. It felt more like pure coincidence and less actual mystery solving. Side note, the girls got aura behind that glass wall. I am so glad we got to see Aimu be a full-blown police detective. She's been a dependable character, and I just like her vibe with her beloved Tokisaka sensei. I would love to see and experience Aimu out in the field, but that's just me dreaming. Yaganuma was a real interesting case. I actually like the spotlight he got, although I wish more of his backstory was sprinkled around the whole series instead of just here. I do think it's impressive writing-wise that they were able to spin up the same story with consistency, whether Yaganuma is either alive or dead in the third arc. To which then it gives more weight to the second playthrough, because saving him leads to the grand and true ending. At the beginning of the series, I thought he was a real asshole character, but I ended up really liking the man by the end, so major improvements for him. Rokushiki is still a badass, devious villain. Could have gone without the scene with him eating the uterus, just ew on so many levels. Side note, absolute masterful play when the investigation team finally caught him with the girl in the shell replica. My jaw dropped at that reveal. Now, even with all of my complaints, I don't think Karo no Shoujo 3 was outright terrible. At the very least, I loved the jump in quality in presentation. Karo no Shoujo was always great, but damn, Innocent Grey really brought their A game with the cinematic style and art style. The scenes of Moonworld with Kyoko, while you have this vocal jazz track playing in the background, was classy as hell. Also, can we talk about the art style change, because it's just fantastic. Prior releases had this softer shade to the characters. They also looked a lot more smoother. Girls in particular had that subtle essence of that moe anime art style. Here though, characters look a lot more rugged and sharper, all while adding extra shading details. If you compare Karo no Shoujo 1 to Karo no Shoujo 3, it's a huge difference, and I love it. Really represents that noir aesthetic the series has in its best form. Older characters look absolutely fantastic in here. Masaki, I felt, was such a
a soft shell boy in Kara no Shoujo 2, but damn, he looking kinda hot. I can forgive his dorky self. Also, can we talk about how Innocent Grace somehow proceeds to make Reiji look even hotter with every release? Actually, one of the hottest VN male protagonists out there. To borrow what someone said when I post about this on Twitter, or X, dude's looks are being trauma buffed. And praise that trauma, because still, to this day, Reiji remains as one of my favorite characters out there. There's a line I absolutely just love that puts it into perspective. Reiji's a slave to his own obsession more than anyone out there. Ironic considering he made a life dismantling others. The man's been constantly suffering, living through the only way he knows how, just so one day ending someone's obsession will eventually lead him to end his own. So it's just so gratifying to see him at the very end finally moving forward. Even if Iroha will never get to know him as her father, he's happy that she's safe and with a family that will take care of her. And that just makes me happy all around. I say this even as the final scene with Iroha and Reiji leaves things ambiguous. I also find Reiji definitively moving on important, because it also means the people closely related to him can also move forward too. Yukari doesn't have to see Reiji constantly suffering anymore, and Kyoko, while she ended their relationship on her own terms, can be reassured that a friend of hers is alright in the end. It's interesting how, in some shape or form, the obsessions shown in Kara no Shoujo 3 have some sort of family aspect to it, both in a good and bad way. Selfish, harmful obsessions are looked down upon, but selfless obsessions, especially towards caring/protecting family, are viewed in a more grayish light, with some positive outlooks to it. I found it admiring to a certain degree, considering how it made characters willfully stronger and also weaker too. But what matters the most is how those fixations are finally put to rest. It's extremely fitting how this installment is called Paradiso in relation to the last part in the Divine Comedy. Kara no Shoujo's thematic ideas mixed with its detective story is a major reason why I like this series so much. Even if Kara no Shoujo 3 wasn't as fantastic as I hoped it would be, I can still say I love the series and its characters. This long journey is worth it for that perfect true ending. So now that the series is over, I guess it's time for Shirobune to publish the Kataga remake. I would also like to thank him for my review copy of Kara no Shoujo 3 and for finally completing the series. So, final question for those who made it to the very end. What are your thoughts about Kara no Shoujo 3 and the series as a whole? I would love to hear them. Many thanks to all the wonderful Patreon members, and if you enjoyed this and want to support the channel, please consider subscribing, as well as checking out these videos for more visual novel recommendations.